Hello, welcome to Revive and Rise. I'm your host, Melody Parrish, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today. For the last couple months, we've been talking about narcissism, manipulation, and now I want to introduce us to guilt. Guilt is a classic way that narcissists will use to manipulate us. And also guilt is a very complicated emotion. And sometimes when we're feeling guilty about things, it can lead us to positive responses, making us aware of things so that we don't repeat them if they were a negative response on our part. But it can also lead us into subconsciously sabotaging ourselves. And it can create a guilt sabotage loop. And we do all of this unconsciously in our subconscious. So I want to touch base on these items for this episode. And we're going to talk first, before we get really started and to dive deep, I want to talk about what guilt is. Guilt is an aversive emotion. It makes us feel really bad. And in turn, when we feel guilty about something, we're going to avoid that situation. It comes from our self-conscious mind reflecting on our behaviors. Guilt is behavior-driven. Brené Brown does a wonderful TED Talk about the difference between guilt and shame, which I'm going to use here because it's very important for us to understand the difference between guilt and shame. And guilt is action driven. We feel guilty because of a behavior. It's more of I have done something bad response. I did this. This was bad. I did this. And when you think about those kinds of things, it's important to remember that when we're guilty or feeling guilty, we are focused on the action being bad. With shame is an idea and a core belief that I am bad. We focus on ourself. It's a self-focused emotion, and shame is I am bad, and it encompasses your whole self-worth. Shame makes you feel bad about who you are. It's I am bad, not I did something bad. So it's important to distinguish those two. Also, guilt is a highly sophisticated emotion, and by that I mean that it relies on advanced cognitive skills of your mind. It relies on your capacity for empathy, which is why psychopaths do not feel guilt. Because they don't have the capacity for empathy. But most human beings do, and that capacity of empathy is involved in our feeling guilt. Guilt also involves cognitive skills about our sense of morality, our self-judgment, and the distinction between, as we said before, your behavior and your identity. All of these are very complex cognitive skills that guilt uses. But sometimes those lines get blurred, right? And sometimes we feel guilty for things we shouldn't feel guilty for. Sometimes we feel guilty for things that were not our fault. People feel guilt for a variety of reasons. They feel guilt for things that they've done, for acts or actions that they committed. If I took your pencil during school and you didn't have a pencil, and then later I felt guilty for that act I did. People also feel guilt because they failed to do something. That's when we get into I should have done this, I should have done that, if I had only done this. And it could have prevented this from happening. So those kinds of guilt for failure to do something. So we've got guilt for doing things, guilt for not doing things, and what about guilt for having thoughts that you think are morally wrong? Sometimes we have thoughts and that don't really align with our core beliefs, with our core values, and we feel guilty for thinking that. And from that, because of that guilt, then we experience shame because I can't believe I thought that. Why would I think that? Then comes in the shame. Then comes in the shame of, well, I felt that way, I thought that way, so therefore I must be a bad person. So that's just an example of how delicately these two are interwoven to each other, and how we have to separate the two to be able to move forward. And just to understand what we're thinking and what we're feeling, and understand why we react the way we do, understand why we do the things we do. We need to separate that guilt and shame and acknowledge both of them, because they both exist in every person. Different levels and about different things, but everyone has guilt and shame. Unless you're a psychopath and you don't have that capability. But that's another topic. And so when we talk about guilt, and we've given definitions, maybe why we would feel guilty about things, and why we would feel guilt. But now I want to talk about how someone can use guilt for manipulation. Guilt is one of the best tools for someone to manipulate another person. Guilt is a way that we can say, oh, this is what's expected. This is where you fell short. You are terrible. And now I want you to do this. It's very hurtful, but it's very effective for the manipulator. Manipulators seem to excel at persuading others that they've been hurt, and therefore that's one of the first ways that manipulators can use guilt to control others, is that they play this victim. They've been harmed, they've been hurt, and so they're able to make you feel guilty for hurting them, even if you didn't, even if you had nothing to do with it. Their power of persuasion is so great that they can make you feel like you did. And they'll use that guilt that you're feeling as a way to punish you. That's classic. And that from that ability, they're able to get you to do things that you normally wouldn't do. They'll get you to get involved in behaviors that you would normally refuse to do. And because of that, there you enter the cycle. And it just keeps feeding itself because you normally would not be engaged in those behaviors, therefore you feel guilty. And then this person will persuade you that they have been hurt by that it's all your fault, and that you should feel guilty, and it just locks you into that cycle. Another way that people manipulators can make you feel guilty or by using guilt would be to subtly suggest that those very emotions are the reason that you should allow yourself to be treated the way that you are treated. That the manipulator is so perfect at highlighting your deficiencies while elevating their perfection. They'll remind you of all that they've done for you. They'll give you a list of things that they've done for you, and therefore you should do something for them. It's kind of you owe me kind of thing. And this happens pretty regularly, and is a classic manipulation. You'll hear sometimes things like, well, I'm the one who cares for you the most, or things like, well, I've always done that for you. I've always been there. And when you're hearing things like that to control your actions or to control your emotions and make you feel certain ways, well, I've always been there for you, so therefore you need to be there for me. You need to do this for me. When this thing that I'm asking you to do goes against everything you believe in, or most of the things that I know you stand against, but I'm going to try and get you to do it anyway. It's those kinds of things and those kinds of ways that your manipulator will use guilt to try and get you to do something that you don't really want to do. And it's also those complex cognitive skills that are required of your mind to kind of move through that guilt and move through those emotions and see what's going on, and to see, should I do it or should I not? Should I do it or should I not? And if you're caught in this guilt cycle, then you're just going to give in. You're going to convince yourself subconsciously that you owe that person, or that, in order to be the person that you're expected to be or you're supposed to be, then you need to do this. And that's another classic thing that goes with the, well, this is what a certain person is supposed to look like: a good worker, a good family member, a good employee, a good student. This is what it looks like. This straight line, there can't be any variation to this. This is what you're supposed to do. And once you get that idea, then oh, well, I don't measure up to that bar because I do it this way, still get the same result. I'm still a good worker. I just do go about things differently. I'm still a good family member. I just go about things differently. But because I don't do it that way, then I must be bad. There goes in that shame. Because I don't follow this straight line that society says, or that those that are around me say that I need to follow this straight line, because I don't do that, even if I get the same end results, I must be bad because I'm doing it the wrong way. There goes that guilt. There goes that, well, you're not perfect. And there goes that you need to fall in line, you need to do it this way, because that's just what you're supposed to do. That's just who you're supposed to be. And it can be a good daughter, a good spouse, a good cousin, a good parent, whatever it may be, when we're talking about good family members or good friends or whatever society says that we're supposed to do to be good. So when you're when a manipulator is playing on all of those things, they can really guilt you into feeling, into doing things that you wouldn't normally do. And in comes the shame with that. And then you just, we as human beings, we have so much of a brain capacity to deal with certain things. And when we're in survival mode, when we're in the middle of a big project, be it at work or be it at home or be it at school, we only have a little bit of mental capacity to deal with these things. And so when we're feeling guilty, when we're feeling shameful, when we're being manipulated, we'll just be like, you know what? Okay, I'll just do it. I'll just do it. If this is what I'm supposed to do, I'm just going to do it. If this is what I'm required to do, I'll just do it. And no questions asked. And then there you go. And so because of that, we get into this this guilt and self-sabotage vicious cycle, and it becomes on a loop, and it becomes a habit, and if it happens long enough, we just do it subconsciously. We just do it, it's like clockwork, and that can be where unresolved guilt about acts that we've done or we haven't done or we thought of doing, it can unconsciously drive us to self-punish ourselves. It can cause us to feel like we're undeserving, and it can really put in to play that deep-seated shame. And once that happens, we'll begin to develop repetitive destructive behaviors because of it. And we won't even know we're doing it. I self-sabotaged for decades, and never even knew it. I never even knew that I was doing that. It just became such a habit, and unconsciously, I was just punishing myself. I was punishing myself because of these deep-rooted shame beliefs and deep-rooted belief systems that I had picked up that weren't true, that weren't real. It was, I was such a terrible person. I'm such a terrible person. I'm so bad. I'm broken. There's something wrong with me. I'm not enough. And, I picked those up for various reasons, and I started to believe them. And because of that, I just started setting the bar so high that I couldn't reach it. And then when I didn't reach it, well, that just confirmed to me all of those negative beliefs. You can't do this, you're not good enough for this, there's something wrong with you, and therefore you're not able to do this. It was just a constant loop. And I had no idea I was doing that. But your subconscious can also view your sabotage as a necessary penance. And when we're feeling guilty of something, we can subconsciously hold ourselves for that penance. And when I'm saying that, I'm saying things like, like always expecting so much of yourself, so much that you're not capable of, but you set that bar so high so that you'll fail, and then that'll just confirm all of those negative beliefs. And so you'll continue to hold yourself down. And by that, I mean things like, perfectionism is a very big manifestation. Procrastination or perfectionism, either way, either one, holding yourself to impossible standards or delaying tasks that you know are needed. For example, if you have a deadline for work for this promotion, and you have that deadline, but you know what? Subconsciously, you feel like you don't deserve something that good. I don't deserve a job that's going to make me that happy. I don't deserve to be happy. So therefore, I procrastinate. I finish, I miss the deadline, and therefore I miss the promotion, and I miss the job of my dreams, right? So those are things of self-sabotaging. Or when I talk about setting a bar for yourself that has impossible standards, I'm for an example, would be like after 2 weeks of learning a new language, thinking that you're going to be fluent in that language after 2 weeks. And when you're not fluent in that language, then you just give up. Then you're just like, see, you can't do this. You can't do this. So why even bother? It's things like that. And in that part, in that aspect, I did that to myself a lot. I would set these bars and these goals for myself, these huge, audacious goals. And I'm not saying to anyone out there, I am not telling you not to dream. I'm not saying not to set big, audacious goals. But what I am saying to you is that dream, and dream big, but be aware that it's going to take small steps to get to that big dream. And that's okay. It's going to take small steps to get to that audacious goal, but that's okay. don't just say, oh, well, I didn't do it the first time, so I can't do it. And there you go. That's it for me. And that's what I would do. I would do that. I would set this big goal for myself, and then when I didn't achieve it on the first try, then I would just declare I couldn't do it, and I would stop trying for a few months, a few weeks, and then I'd go back and try and do it again the same way, and it was still I still wasn't able to do it, and therefore there must be something wrong with me, and I constantly did that. So I'm in no way saying don't dream. I'm in no way saying don't have big goals, because I'm a firm believer that you dream as big as you can. I'm a firm believer in you make these big, audacious goals as big and as bright as you can. Live your life as loud and as proud and as big as you can. Firm believer in that. But I'm also a firm believer in sometimes it takes small steps to get there. And don't be discouraged if it takes longer, or if that way may not be the way that you planned on it to go. Also, when we're talking about the self-sabotage, we're also talking about maybe you have guilt over past actions or perceived flaws. Maybe you have guilt for other reasons, but that breeds a belief that you're bad or you're unworthy, and there comes that shame that comes in. I'm bad because I did this. I'm bad and I'm not worthy. And so what you'll do is when good things happen to you, you'll just sabotage yourself so that you can realign yourself with the reality of your low self-image and your low shame image. Something good happens, you're like, oh, no. I can't be that happy. I cannot do that. Things can't work out for me. It just doesn't happen. I'm not good enough. There you go. And you just destroy it. And that happens frequently too. That's why it's so important for us to build self-confidence and to put ourselves in situations where we know we're going to succeed in things, as well as putting ourselves in situations where we're trying new things. Does that make sense? We need to put ourselves into both situations so that with our successes, that confirms our self-confidence and builds our self-confidence for us to try new things. And that all goes back to that shame and that guilt. The guilt breeds the shame breeds the guilt, and you attempt at happiness, but then you remember the shame, and so you sabotage the whole situation. That's classic too. And so now, I just want to talk about how, how these things manifest. We talked about procrastination and perfectionism a little earlier and throughout this episode. Also, if you're pushing away relationships, pushing away people that care about you, pushing away people that are trying to help you, and that can be when you're pushing away mentors, when you're pushing away family members, friends, or romantic partners. You can be pushing away a lot of different relationships, but that is a self-sabotage as well, because you're not wanting to move forward to that happiness. And so therefore, you don't think you deserve it, so you're just pushing away. And also in comes, substance abuse, drugs, alcohol, to try and numb all of the guilt, all of the shame. That's such a driving force. The alcohol, the drugs or other things that we may be addicted to, they don't heal the guilt or the shame, but they just numb us to the effects. And that can, and that's used as a coping mechanism. Also, neglect. We don't think about that a lot, but when you neglect yourself, it's a coping mechanism to drown out the inner stress. And it creates a continuous cycle of regret when you neglect yourself. And when you just don't put your needs at a higher priority, and then that leads to further self-sabotage and further use of the guilt and the shame. So we have these patterns that come up, these cycles, that we have this guilt, manipulative, self-sabotage cycle. But how do we break this cycle? Well, I have my general go-to things of, creating boundaries and those kinds of things and self-love. And yes, that 100% will help to break this cycle. But one important thing that I think we need to do, and it's what I struggle with a lot and what I'm learning to do now, and in the process of doing within myself, is to identify the thoughts and then immediately push back against those thoughts. So, for example, when those intrinsic beliefs, those intrusive thoughts come up, or those feelings of worthlessness, those core beliefs that you've picked up from somewhere, the thing that, oh, I am terrible, I am stupid, I am broken, when those kinds of things, you have to notice it. You begin to notice it and you push back. Wait. You're not broken. You're not terrible. Maybe you made a terrible decision. Maybe you did something that you wished you hadn't have. Maybe you did something that you didn't have enough information about to make that decision. But that doesn't make you the terrible person. You just did something terrible. So, or things, a lot of times when I'll start, because it's classic for me to, in my self-sabotage cycle, I will go back to things that I failed at, things that I didn't accomplish, and I'll say, see, this just proves, see, you can't do this, you did this, da 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 da, and it's just, now that I'm aware of it, it's just so immediate that it happens within a fraction of a second. And I'm learning that when I hear that or when I think that I need to push back, but wait a minute, and I need to just counter that with either a positive success I've had, a positive feeling I've had, a positive emotion, a positive experience, but something I immediately need to push back. And I'm getting better at that. It takes lots of practice though, and I'm still nowhere near where I should be. I think it's always going to be something I strive for, but I'm working on it, and I feel like as long as I'm working on it, that's something good, right? So, but I feel like that is one of the biggest things to break the cycle. Another thing to kind of break the loop, because you just need to break that automatic loop that your mind gets thrown into. That's all you need to do. So just train your mind that when you acknowledge those intrinsic beliefs, you acknowledge those intrusive thoughts, that you need to immediately counteract with something positive. A success you've made, you've had a positive experience that you've shared or had yourself. Another thing is I didn't really understand the self-forgiveness. I really grappled with that for a while. But the biggest way I've found that helps me to understand self-forgiveness is to differentiate between guilt and shame. And when Brené Brown talks about that, I highly recommend anyone to go and listen to her TED Talk. It's on YouTube. Brené Brown's TED Talk, all of her TED Talks on vulnerability, shame, guilt. They're amazing. She's an amazing person with such knowledge and such depth. And I would highly recommend reading her books, listening to her podcast, because it really helps you to understand self-forgiveness, differentiating between the guilt and the shame. And it's so important. So when something happens and you start to feel guilty about it, then you can say, well, I did something bad. This bad thing happened because of something that I did. That doesn't make me a terrible person. I just made a mistake. And let yourself make the mistake, because that's how we learn. But do not take that into, oh, I made this mistake and I'm a terrible person. Not what I did, but who I am. And once you start to acknowledge the difference between the guilt and shame, it'll make things so much easier, because then you'll acknowledge that difference. Then you'll be able to counteract these intrusive thoughts that you're having, these negative ideas, these core beliefs, and then you can begin to rebuild and reshape those core beliefs and those ideas about yourself and about who you are. We may do bad things, but that doesn't make us a bad person just because we made a mistake. And so I want to thank you. I hope that I've said something today that helps you to think about things, helps you in your reflection time. reflect on things. And I hope that I've said something to help you through these things. But whatever you're going through, just remember that you do not have to suffer alone.